Hi, and thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to take a look at Proverbs chapter 24, verse 27. Here's what it says. It says, "Do your planning and prepare your fields before you build your house." You know, in America, we loved to see the finished product. But what we don't love is the long process that one has to go through to get a finished product like a house. Somehow our microwave, instant gratification society wants the product, but they want it without the pain and the work and the effort and the planning that goes into making the finished product. But here's the thing, when you read the Bible, you discover that God is a God of process. A process is defined like this. It's a series of actions or steps that are taken in order to achieve a particular end goal. Did you hear that? It's a series of action or steps. It's interesting that in the Bible, there is no such thing and there is no mention of any character that was an overnight success. That's a myth. That's a lie of American culture. There is no such thing as an overnight success. Nobody becomes a success overnight. You see, when God calls a man or a woman into their destiny, He first takes them on a journey of refinement to make them who they need to be and teach them what they need to know so that they can successfully fulfill that destiny. Now, most everybody in the world knows the name King David. But what most people don't know is that there was 20 years and 20 chapters between the day that Samuel anointed David to be king and the day that he actually became the full king of Israel. 20 years. That's a long time to wait. But you know what? During those 20 years, many of which were spent either in a cave or in the wilderness, God was teaching, God was shaping, God was forging David into the man that he needed to be so that he could become the greatest king to ever sit on the throne of Israel. And so David's life and David's journey is an example to us for how God works in our lives. After God calls us, after God makes a promise to us, there's always a time of preparation required before He releases us into that calling or He fulfills that promise. And sometimes, let's be honest, when we're in the process and the process is taking way longer than we wanted to, we get frustrated and we begin to wonder if God has abandoned us. During that time period, some people even decide that they can't wait any longer for God to do whatever He's doing, and so they try to shortcut the process. The problem is, when you shortcut the process, it always ends up being a mistake. Why? Because what happens when you take shortcuts in a job or a recipe, the job or the recipe gets ruined because you didn't do it the right way. So when you shortcut the process, you actually destroy the quality of the product. Now, when I think about processes, I'm reminded of a story I heard about the Chinese bamboo tree. The tree begins literally as a nut that you plant in the soil, and it has to be watered and it has to be fertilized, get this, every single day for 5 years before it finally breaks through the ground. All that time, for 5 years, it spreads out its roots beneath the surface. And if at any time the watering or the fertilizing process stops, the Chinese bamboo tree dies in the ground. But something happens in that 5th year. The Chinese bamboo tree finally breaks through the ground. It grows to nearly 90 feet tall. And get this, in just 6 weeks. So for 5 years, you see nothing above ground. And then after 5 years, in a period of 6 weeks, it grows to nearly 90 feet tall. Amazing. The tree has to take 5 long years of doing what? Of developing strong, deep, wide root systems. You say, well, what's that all about? Because if you've got a 90-foot tree, it's gonna topple over if it doesn't have a deep root system. That's what God is doing with us. That's what he was doing with David as he was preparing him during those 20 years to be king. He was growing a deep root system in him. And so the question is this: while you are in process, God's process, will you allow the waiting to develop you or embitter you? You see, David could have quickly become bitter in his waiting because his conditions weren't very good. He was in the wilderness. He was constantly under persecution and attack. He finds himself in the cave of Adullam. He's got no one around him except this ragtag bunch of misfit soldiers. But David doesn't become bitter. Why? Because David knew that God was using the process to bring about the promise to make him a king. I don't know what promises you're holding on to today, and I don't know what God has spoken to you about your destiny and called you to, but I do know this, that there is a process that every single one of us has to go through to inherit those promises and to walk in our God-given destiny. And that process is going to require us to trust God when we don't understand and when it doesn't make sense to us. So I want to just encourage you today, as you're in process, don't fall prey to the temptation to take a shortcut, because it will mess things up in your life and in your ministry. Instead, trust the process. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you this Sunday as we continue our Summer of Inspiration series. God bless and have a great day.